Hi, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Cheryl Butler, and you're listening to the Mighty Mommy's Quick and Dirty Tips podcast, which will help make your life as a parent a little bit easier and a lot more fun. Welcome. Today, I'm so excited to welcome a very special guest and one of my colleagues here at Quick and Dirty Tips, Mignon Fogarty. Mignon is the founder of the Quick and Dirty Tips Network and the creator of the award-winning podcast, Grammar Girl. She's also the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips for Better Writing, and 6 other books on language. And she's an inductee in the Podcasting Hall of Fame. With summer vacation for our kids right around the corner, Mignon is going to share some great ideas with us on how we can keep our kids engaged with their summer reading and writing, something that many of us as parents struggle with because we want to find that balance of keeping them on task throughout the summer, but also letting them have that much-needed summer vacation downtime. So, Mignon, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Mighty Mommy podcast. Welcome.
Oh, sure, Cheryl. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that great introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. As I mentioned, summer vacation is fast approaching, and kids will have about 10 weeks of free time on their hands. What are a couple of key things parents can do to prepare their students for summer reading and writing?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would take me to the library once a week and let me pick out my own books. I think that's really important, is to let kids pick out their own books because, that's what they are most interested in reading. So even if that's, maybe even a comic book or a graphic novel or an audio book, something that is a book or book adjacent or book-like that they can get excited about, you want to get that into their hands.
That's great. I did that. One of my, I have 8 kids, and one of my sons absolutely is not anything about reading or writing, but he's very hands-on. He loves building things, and he wants to be an architect. So what we did with him was exactly that suggestion. We let him go pick out like Popular Mechanics and building magazines, and just to have him holding something in his hand and reading things that interested him finally turned the page for him and got him interested in reading things about the field that he wants to go into. So thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder, and you I don't have children. You have much more experience with this than I do, but I would imagine I was also really motivated by goals and rewards when I was little. I would get a gold star for finishing a book on a little page that my mom made. So if you have a child who's motivated by that sort of thing, I imagine they aren't all motivated by that kind of feedback. But if you can find a way to set up some goals, a book a week, a book every 2 weeks, something that will work for that particular child, then maybe setting up a reward structure would work too.
Great. That's segues into my next question that I was going to ask you, which is kind of in keeping with what we just talked about getting your kids interested and prepared for doing some reading and writing over the summer. And I was going to ask for the non-readers, like I just mentioned with my son, keeping them engaged. So some type of a reward system that might be a motivator for them. Right. And do you have any other ideas for non-readers? I know you're in the world of language, and I personally, somebody that I love words. I love just to pick up a magazine or a book and even just, smell the paper. I just love all things about it. But for kids that just aren't going to want to do that and pick up a book, do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, another thing I was thinking of is, peer pressure always works pretty well. And if you can get your kids involved in a group, whether that's a book club or a poetry writing class at the library, or maybe going to like if you're lucky enough to have a bookstore that has author readings in your city, take them to that with some friends, make it an outing with friends, so that your child has a motivation, whether it's to impress his or her friends or, have an opportunity to engage with kids their own age, that something that makes it more of a social activity with other kids can also make it something they look forward to instead of maybe something they dread. It's an opportunity to see their friends.
Oh, that's great, because sometimes strength in numbers, kids do like to hang out with their buddies and their pals over the summer, and if they're not alone, sometimes I think the thoughts of, if you have a child that is motivated by social settings, having to just, get hunkered down in your house, in your bedroom or something and read and do it could be like, oh, that could be a drudgery. But when it's in a setting like that, that definitely motivates. And there might even be some friendly competition if they have contests or anything like that, about how many books do you think you can read this summer or that type of thing. You never know where that could go. So thank you. That's great.
Sure. And I was a professor for a few years. And one of the things I noticed is that when I had kids do peer editing, when they would, know that they were going to read each other's work and edit each other's work, sometimes it seemed as if they worked a little harder than when they knew their peers were going to see their work than when they knew it was just me that was going to grade it. So, they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have their friends see something bad that they wrote. So they'll work a little harder on it.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Thank you. So speaking of fun, do you have any suggestions for fun word games that we can play with our kids, either online or offline, either things that kids can play? Obviously my kids, there's 8 of them, so they have siblings they can do projects and games with, or there are a lot of games that seem to be popular that you can do just by yourself to gain some traction with keeping up with reading and writing. So do you have any suggestions in that area?
Sure. I mean, everybody knows about Scrabble, and I love Scrabble. I'm still a big fan of that. There's a fun little card game called Typo where you have cards that have letters on it and you make words, and I've always thought that was a fun game too. I mean, a game that we played when I was a kid is we would just take the dictionary and find a random word and then either read the definition or make up a different definition, and the other person had to guess whether it was a real or made up definition. And I think somebody, since then has actually made a board game based on that concept, but you can just do it with any dictionary, a physical book or even an online dictionary. And that can...
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that can be really fun. I actually have a card game called Peeve Wars that is fun. Your goal is to amass an army of peeves and annoy your opponent to death. but we actually joked when we were making it, the game developer that worked with me, he really wanted to put no educational value on the outside of the deck of cards, because I would not say that it's not going to teach you a whole lot. It'll expose you to what the major pet peeves are in the world, and it's actually just kind of fun, but it's not super educational.
Oh, but we have to have, like I said, fun. That when kids think it's fun, they look forward to it. We still do board games in my house. I've got kids in college, kids that are married, and then I still have high schoolers and a middle schooler, and they still love board games. And I think it's because we started them off with them when they were really young. And Scrabble is definitely still one of the top games, and I don't think that one will ever go out of style. So thank you. Great ideas.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any tricks, Mignon, that can help kids retain certain grammar rules? One I always refer to, and it stuck with me forever, and I don't think I'll ever forget it, is the rule of I before E, except after C. So do you think these are helpful, or is there value to them, or is it just better to just, focus on the things that you like to read and write and not worry, don't get so hung up on rules, but you're the expert, so I'd love to defer to you on what you think about that.
Well, it's kind of both. I definitely think they're helpful. And I try to, in the Grammar Girl podcast, how I got started really, and that's almost why it's called Quick and Dirty Tips, is I was always coming up with memory tricks to remember different rules. So, people always ask about the difference between affect and effect, one with an A and one with an E. And I use the memory trick raven. I think of a big black raven up on a roof, like ready to swoop down in the street. And the only reason is because raven has the letters AVEN in it, which stands for affect, verb, effect, noun. It's a little memory trick you just remember that affect with an A is usually a verb and effect with an E is usually a noun. And so I think of the Raven, and I remember I have another one for who versus whom. If you can answer the question with him, which has an M on the end of it, then you usually want whom. And that trick just works because him is an object pronoun and whom is an object pronoun. But you don't need to know that to remember that him with an M means you need whom with an M. So I love memory tricks. I think they're really helpful. Unfortunately, the one that you mentioned, I before E except after C, it's a kind of a useless trick because there's so many exceptions to it. It's, teachers have come out and said, maybe we shouldn't teach that anymore because it's just so frustrating and confusing for people that when you bump up against all these exceptions.
Well, that's good to know. See, I've just learned something myself, so thank you. That's great. But no, I think those little mind games or just anything to trigger your memory, and I never knew the one about the Raven, and that is a big one for people, affect and effect. So thank you. I've learned 2 things here now.
Sure.
Thank you.
And actually, what I was going to say, though, the reason it's both is that when you're doing creative writing, you really shouldn't worry about the grammar rules in the beginning. If you're writing a story, you need to just get that story down on paper or on the computer screen. And if you're thinking at every step about, do I need a comma here? Is this the right word? It's going to inhibit your creativity. So when people are doing creative writing, especially, and maybe even the first draft of nonfiction writing, I think it's best to not focus so much on the rules. And then in your second or third draft, go back, and that's when you fix all the little errors. And you just have to make sure you leave time for that second and third draft.
Right. Oh, that's so true. Editing is the big key there. That's great. Thank you. Now, I have a son that's graduating from high school this year, so he's a senior, and he'll be heading to college in the fall. So for freshman students that are heading into college, do you have any advice for them? Because they don't really have structured reading and writing assignments during the summer like kids that are in school that, they have so many books that they need to read, and they journal and do things of that nature. How about kids going into college? Because now those kids are going to have to learn their own schedule and their own self-discipline about keeping up with assignments and things like that. So do you have any advice for those students?
Yes, I think if he knows what his classes are, I would get in touch with his professors and see if he could get a syllabus and get ahead on the reading. It's so overwhelming when you're a freshman anyway. If you could get a little bit ahead, that would be would really help in that first month. And nobody ever did that for me. But as a professor, if a student had gotten in touch with me and wanted to know what the reading assignments were going to be for classes in the fall, I would have been really impressed and excited to meet that student in the fall. So not only would it be a good idea to, get a jump start, but it would also, sort of raise your profile with your professors and get you off to a good start with them too.
Wow, that is excellent. What a great suggestion. I didn't even think you could reach out to them and do anything like that in the summer. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, most professors have email addresses online. They probably won't be as quick to respond in the summer. And if you're having trouble, you might also contact the dean of the department. If you're, having trouble reaching a professor, because some professors, they go overseas in the summer and do research, but the dean might be able to get you an old syllabus from, a class from the previous year or something like that too.
Wonderful. Oh, Brendan's going to be getting an earful tonight. Great idea. Okay. Anything else for those kids, or even, they don't have to be college kids, but in winding up, do you have any other pieces of advice to students that would just keep them interested as we go along the summer? And for parents, if you think something would help parents at this stage of the game. School doesn't get out for us here for about 6 more weeks. So it's nice when you can plan ahead and you don't have the bus coming in on that last day of school, and then it just gets away from you. All of a sudden it's 4th of July, and then you're heading into August, and then kids are behind because they haven't set up any kind of a plan for over the summer. So any tips there?
Yeah, I can't say enough about local libraries and bookstores. I think if you just went to their websites, and most of them will probably have posted what their events are for the next couple of months, whether that's book readings or classes, the library or things like that. So I think if you can get those schedules now and see what's coming up in the next couple of months that would be available for your kids, that would be great to get it on the calendar now. So you can see, okay, 2 weeks after you're out of school, this really cool author is coming to the local bookstore and we're going to go listen to her talk. And so why don't you read her book, and then you can actually ask questions to the person who wrote that book. I think that could be a really fun thing to get excited about that's coming up. Or, I remember taking a poetry class at my library and just loving it. And so I would check what their upcoming schedules are.
Great. Yeah, I think our libraries are still such a hidden gem. There's so much that goes on at the library that families might not even realize. It's not just about going and checking out a book, but the people that they bring in and the programs. And it's not just for one day. Sometimes I know at our library, you can sign up for like a 5-week activity where you meet, once a week and engage in not just the reading or the writing, but they will associate a craft with it or something hands-on. So that takes it to a different level. So I love that.
Yeah, I was just remembered my local library here in Reno. They have a little maker space, and they have musical, and they have like an electronic keyboard that people can play on, and they have a lot of things besides books too. So if you have a child who isn't necessarily an enthusiastic reader, it's a way to at least get him into into the building where books are. So maybe
right, get them into the setting.
Right, get them into the setting, and maybe after they're done using the craft tools or something, maybe they'll pick up a book about it.
Right. That's the hope. And a lot of times that really does happen. And sometimes I know I found with my own kids is not, if I don't like to push it and force it, but I still am, encouraging it, as much as I can. And when it's kind of their idea, even though, they have to, come to the library with me or go where we're going. But when they kind of branch out on their own and start exploring, then it just becomes, they own it and they're excited about it. And I think especially for kids that are just not bookworms and want to be there, at least if there's other ways to get them excited about what goes on in a library or in the literary world. Plays, I found plays are great too, because then they know the play was also a book, and we've started doing more of that in my family, and my kids, my high school kids love that.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Well, thank you so much, Mignon, for these great ideas. Summer vacation is definitely something that families look forward to after the grind of schedules and really overscheduling a lot of things throughout the school year. So you look forward to that downtime. But sometimes too much downtime is not always a good thing either. So when we can combine some of the tools that are going to get them ready for their next incoming year of school, and, it's educational, but it's fun. We balance it out, and it's a win-win. So your tips are very helpful for that, and thank you so much. I know the Mighty Mommy listeners are going to appreciate it and get a lot of good tips from you today.
Sure. Good luck to everyone out there.
Thanks again to Mignon, Grammar Girl, for joining me today and sharing so many fun and easy-to-use tips for keeping summer reading fun and exciting. You can listen to the Grammar Girl podcast on your favorite podcast platform. As always, thanks so much for listening, and until next time, happy parenting!